The chandelier over the Blackwell ballroom threw light like frozen rain. Diamonds glittered in dresses, laughter rose in rehearsed waves, and 100 cameras blinked, hunting for the one moment that would trend before midnight. At the center of the marble dais stood Adrian Blackwell, oil magnate, market whisperer, a man who turned rumors into gold. His jaw was stone, his tuxedo blade black, his gaze lifting the room into silence the way a conductor lifts a hand. Beside him, on a velvet settee brought in at the last minute, sat his son, Theo. 7 years old, small sneakers that didn't quite touch the floor, hair the color of afternoon wheat, eyes too old for his face. He twisted a piece of red string around 2 fingers, once, twice, 3 times, and did not look up. "Friends," Adrian said, voice resonant enough to hush a crowd built to resist being hushed. "You know why you are here." They knew. The papers had gnawed on it for a week. The billionaire whose boy had not uttered a syllable since the accident. The tragedy that made a fortress out of a penthouse. The strange edict announced in a line that looked like a dare. "Whoever makes my son speak will marry me." A stunt, some said. A wound leaking into theater, others said. A father's madness, said the kinder columnists. But everyone accepted the invitation because nobody could afford to miss the moment a king unmasked himself. Adrian did not blink when he said it again. "Whoever breaks my son's silence will become my wife." The room reacted like crystal struck with a spoon. Gasps, nervous giggles, a tremor of triumph from certain corners. In the front row, 5 women the press had already anointed as frontrunners exchanged quick glances. A pediatric neurologist in a silver sheath, an heiress with a grin the tabloids called disarming, an actress who'd won an award for crying beautifully, a lifestyle mogul who could fold grief into a brand, a viscount's daughter flown in on a rumor. Theo wound the string tighter. "Doctors have tried," Adrian said. "Therapists, specialists, nothing. My son speaks to no one. He hasn't since—" He did not finish the sentence. The room kindly filled in the rest, since his mother died. On cue, Blackwell staff ushered the first contender to the dais. Dr. Evelyn Vance carried a portfolio of credentials like armor. She knelt to Theo's level and spoke in a voice that slid across the marble like lotion. "Hello, Theodore. I'm Dr. Vance. I brought picture cards. If you point to one, I'll know what you want." Theo stared at the red string burning into his fingers. "Some children," she continued, smile never cracking, "feel safer behind quiet. But safety's a room with a door. You can open it. Show me apple." She fanned the cards. Apple, dog, ball, sun. Theo curled his shoulders inward. The string looped over a 3rd finger. The actress tried next. She produced a puppet from her clutch bag, a fox with extravagant lashes. "My name is Ferris," she squeaked. "I get scared too." "Do you get scared?" The fox kissed the air. Cameras loved it. Theo's eyes slid to the far wall where a gilt mirror showed how small he was inside this room. The heiress promised ponies. The mogul promised a sanctuary of sound baths and crystals. The viscount's daughter promised boarding schools with enough charm to make loneliness fashionable. Theo pulled the string once like a bell rope and let it fall. Standing under the balcony, unnoticed by the throng, Mara Alves watched with the stillness of someone trained to vanish. Her uniform was navy. Her hands were raw in the way hands get when bleach writes its name into the knuckles. She had spent the afternoon polishing the brass on the banisters that glowed now like captured sunset. When the call came that Mr. Blackwell wanted every surface to forgive the fingerprints of grief, she signed the NDA without reading the small box where you initial that you will not speak of what you see. She had learned a long time ago that secrets pay the rent. Mara did not watch Adrian. She watched the boy, the red string, the way he breathed through his mouth as though words were a room too crowded to enter. She knew that look. She had seen it on her little brother at 8, after a winter that took their father's job and their mother's laughter. She had learned then that silence is not empty. Silence is full of sharp things. The next parade of solutions began. Toys ribbed in chrome, tablet apps that promised miracles in 30 days, a therapy dog with a silk bow. A woman whispered to Adrian that the vagus nerve could be coaxed with a tone. Another promised that emotional blockage could be unlatched by tapping on meridians. In the doorway, a man with a camera muttered that this was the best cruelty money could buy. Theo's fingers were purple where the string bit. Adrian's mouth hardened. Whatever he felt, he had exiled it behind a wall expensive enough to look like strength. "Enough," he said. The microphone gave the word a courtroom's finality. "We're done with parlor tricks." Cameras inched closer, smelling blood in the water. "Mr. Blackwell," the voice came from the side aisle, soft enough to sound like somebody had dropped it and hoped not to be caught picking it up. Heads turned, annoyed that the choreography had been interrupted by a person without a PR team. A house manager frowned. Staff remain in service corridors. Mara swallowed and stepped anyway into the light that wasn't built for her. Her shoes were scuffed. She had a spray bottle hooked to her belt like a holster. "I cleaned the East Wing, sir. I'm sorry. I know this isn't my place. But I think you're scaring him." The room winced as one body. The audacity, the indecorum, the indecency of being right. Adrian pivoted slowly, icicle precise. "And you are?" Mara. She could feel sweat pool at the base of her spine. She did not let herself look at the cameras. "I know quiet kids. My brother didn't talk for months after some bad things. I learned you can't wrestle words out of a child. You have to make a place where words want to live." A few guests rolled their eyes. A few looked ashamed. Dr. Vance's smile tightened into something with teeth. "And what would you propose?" Adrian asked. Each syllable weighed on a scale. "Miss Mara." "A broom closet," she said, "or any room that isn't this one. No cameras, no audience, no prizes, just someone who won't fill the silence for him." "You believe you can make him speak?" "I don't believe I can make him do anything, but I can listen." She took a breath. "And I make a good paper boat." Theo's head moved, barely, but his eyes flickered toward her and the red string loosened a fraction. It was nothing. It was everything. A small laugh escaped from someone near the champagne fountain. Adrian heard it and didn't care. He studied the cleaner as if she were a stock with a chart that didn't make sense. "Everyone out," he said. His chief of staff blanched. "Sir, the press, out." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Money is a weather system. The ballroom emptied in a flurry of offended silk and disappointed microphones. The contenders swept their cards and crystals back into their clutches, heels snapping their disapproval. In 5 minutes the chandelier still rained light, but the room belonged to 3 people. A father, a boy, a woman with bleach-cured hands. Adrian stepped down from the dais and removed the microphone from his lapel, as if stripping off a lie. "If you fail me," he said, close enough that she could smell expensive cologne and something underneath it like metal, "you'll go back to being invisible. If you hurt him, there's not a country you can clean in where I won't find you." Mara nodded. "Fair." She didn't approach Theo head-on. She veered toward the catering station, found a linen napkin, folded it corner to corner. She worked without hurry because hurry is a predator. When she was done, she held a paper boat imperfectly born of cloth. It sagged a little in the middle. It looked real. "My mom taught me," she said, settling onto the marble step a careful distance away, not looking at Theo, looking instead at the floor as if speaking to the tile. "We used to float them in a puddle after storms. She said some boats sink quick and some find their way all the way to the grate." She slid the boat across the step where it stopped, tipped, righted itself. "Sometimes the ones that look weakest go the farthest." Silence. Not the cathedral kind, the fragile kind that you hold cupped like a moth, blowing just enough breath to keep it alive. The red string loosened from Theo's fingers and fell into his lap. He did not speak, but he reached out, slow as a thaw, and set 2 fingers on the cloth boat as if confirming that it was not a trick. Adrian exhaled a sound he hadn't meant anyone to hear. Mara glanced up once, just once. "Can we try a broom closet, Mr. Blackwell?" He nodded. "Use the one by the east corridor. I'll have the camera feed cut." "No," Mara said. "Leave the camera. Point it at the ceiling. You can watch us not talking. That's the deal." Adrian hesitated and then made a small motion with his hand. Power. Redirected. Mara stood, stepped back, and extended her arm in a question, not a command. Theo slid off the settee, boat in one hand, string in the other, and followed. The chandelier kept raining light on a stage no one needed anymore. In the cleaner's closet, a rectangle of citrus and dust, Mara sat on the bucket upside down and Theo took the only other seat available, a crate of folded aprons. The vent hummed softly overhead. A strip of light at the bottom of the door performed a patient ballet of specks. No one spoke. Mara pulled a second napkin from her pocket. She folded without looking up. Theo watched without letting his eyes be seen to watch. "I'm not going to ask you questions," she said eventually, voice low enough to be mistaken for the vent. "I hate questions when my chest is tight. Feels like someone knocking on a door I don't want to open." Theo's fingers found the red string and looped it around the boat, tying a clumsy knot. Mara folded another boat. "My brother's name is Daniel. When things got loud in our house, he'd crawl into the space under the sink. He said the pipes talked in a language that made sense. I didn't understand, but I learned to sit on the linoleum and let the pipes talk." Theo slid the stringed boat along the floor toward her shoe. It bumped, turned, bumped again. When she didn't celebrate, when she didn't clap or praise or name it progress, his shoulders lost a notch of their height. Mara set her boat beside his, two quiet hulls moored between a mop and a vacuum that had seen better wars. On a monitor in the security room, Adrian watched grey static and the blur of a ceiling tile. He listened to a vent and 2 sets of breath. For a man who moved markets before lunch, it was the least he had ever asked of time. In the closet, Mara wiped her hands on her pants and said the only true thing left. "I don't care if you never speak to me, Theo. I care that you don't have to hold your breath all the time." He blinked slowly, and the red string untied itself. He did not speak, but silence for the first time in a year did not feel like a cage. It felt like weather changing. Outside the door the world sharpened its knives, called it a scandal, called it a miracle, called it everything except what it was. A woman who knew how to sit still, a boy who had not been asked to perform his pain, and a father in a hallway, holding his breath with his son. The chandelier went on shining, the boats did not sink, and somewhere between a mop and a bucket, a vow began to mean something different from the words that made it. At dawn, the Blackwell penthouse perched over the city, like a ship in harbour, all glass and steel and morning light. The ballroom had been restored to its spotless lie. If you didn't know what had been staged there hours earlier, you would only notice the faint impression of a settee on the rug, and the way certain corners looked as if they had listened too hard. Adrian hadn't slept. He stood at the kitchen island with a mug he didn't drink from, and watched security footage of a closed door in an east corridor, just a rectangle of wood and a strip of light at the bottom. He watched it the way a believer watches a tomb on the 3rd day. His chief of staff, Bryony Hale, arrived without sound. She wore charcoal like it was a blade and carried an iPad like a shield. "You can't marry a janitor," she said, "because in the hour before the world wakes, certain courtesies are optional." "I haven't married anyone," Adrian said. "You made a promise into a microphone. Promises like that develop teeth. Legal is already fielding queries. PR has 3 versions of contrition drafted and 1 version of triumph. The markets will accept a story of a father driven by grief. They will not accept a story of a CEO choosing a spouse via parlor game." "That was the point," he said, "to force something to move." Bryony placed the iPad on the island and rotated it toward him. Headlines scrolled, furious and ecstatic. Clips replayed the vow with red captions. A pundit asked whether wealth had rendered tragedy performative. A morning host, eyes wet at the corners, said perhaps the boy needed privacy while simultaneously showing drone footage of the boy's school. "Whatever moves, Adrian," she said, "must move under our direction. You cannot give chaos your microphone." He rubbed his thumb along the mug's rim. "She asked for a closet." Bryony blinked, recalibrating to he. "The cleaner. She asked for nothing else." "She will ask," Bryony said flatly, "or someone will ask for her." "Find out her full name," he said, "where she lives, who she loves, who she fears." "That's what I do," Bryony said, not taking offense because she was offense. She hesitated. "And the boy?" "He'll wake to a quieter house than he's known for a year," Adrian said. "No cameras today, no parades." Bryony looked at him, for once without agenda. Do you want him to speak, Adrian? Or do you want to win? He didn't answer. In a basement apartment 8 blocks away, Mara stood at a sink that coughed before it poured. Her hands trembled as she rinsed bloodless soap from her skin. The water smelled faintly of rust. The mirror over the sink was cracked in a star that never quite closed. She pressed her palms to the counter and told herself the truth. She had stepped into a story where people like her are the prop, not the plot. Her phone shuddered with messages. Unknown numbers offered her interviews. A reporter wanted to buy the rights to her childhood. A woman from an agency promised she could monetize authenticity. Her boss texted, "You're late." She pulled on her navy uniform, the one clean thing she owned that didn't lie about what it was, and tied her hair back in a knot that kept the day out of her face. By 8, the east corridor was a hush of gilded frames and lemon oil. The closet door she had closed last night looked smaller in daylight, less heroic, more like a place people put things they don't want to see. Theo was already there, a black hoodie zipped up to his chin, red string curled in his palm. He stood with one shoulder grazing the wall as if the building could steady him. When he saw Mara, he didn't smile, but his head tipped the tiniest degree. "Hola," she said without thinking, then corrected herself. "Hi?" He shifted his weight, the closest he'd come to return a greeting. The closet welcomed them with the same indifferent hum. They took their places. Mara let the quiet come back like a tide. After 5 minutes, she pulled from her tote a small metal tin, the kind that once held mints, now holding all the bright scraps that remain of a week. Bits of ribbon, a washer, a button, a paperclip untwisted into a question. "My mother used to call this a junk orchestra," she said. "You can make a song with anything that didn't know it was an instrument." She set the washer spinning on the concrete with a flick. It hummed, wobbled, sang quietly of circles that forget how to be true. Theo's eyes tracked it, head cocked. He didn't reach for it. Not yet. "Sometimes we'd sit outside our building," she said, "and make the music that could drown the bad music." Theo crouched, touched the washer's edge to steady it, then sent it spinning again, harder. It sang longer this time. They built a chorus out of small things. A paperclip became a tuning fork against the crate. A ribbon whispered when dragged across the floor. The tin, turned upside down, thumped a soft heartbeat. At the 14th minute, Theo used the red string to lash the 2 cloth boats together, clumsy knot over clumsy knot, and tugged gently so that Mara's boat nudged his wherever it drifted. He did not look up. He did not speak. But he smiled. A small, private thing. Gone almost as soon as it came, but not gone. Outside, Bryony stood just beyond the corner, watchful through a sliver of open door. She watched the boy's hands, the cleaner's patience, the way both refused the script. She tapped a message to legal, and then, thinking better of it, deleted it without sending. At lunch, Adrian appeared like weather, inevitable and difficult to hold responsible. He didn't step into the closet. He leaned against the corridor wall and slid down until he sat on the marble, his back to the paint, knees drawn up the way his son sat when he thought no one was looking. "Can I pay you to stay?" he said, voice low enough not to cross the threshold. "You already do," Mara said from inside, not unkindly. "Not like this," he said. "I mean, stay through the messy middle, when the press is bored and the board is angry, and the markets want a story that fits in their mouth. You can't buy that," she said, "but you can stop making it harder." What would that mean? Fire the nannies who treat him like a brand. Stop letting strangers build their careers on his pain. Sit on the floor with him and spin a washer. He rubbed his jaw with a sound like sandpaper. "I don't know how to be in a room I'm not controlling." "Me neither," she said. "Then life taught me." He wanted to tell her that life had taught him too, but the lesson he learned was that control is a boat you must never let go of, because the water underneath is cold and full of teeth. He looked toward the strip of light at the bottom of the door. "What else?" "Teach him a skill that isn't survival," she said. "Let him help you make something ugly and imperfect and real." "What?" he said. "Because men who ask the world to move want specifics." "Dinner," she said. "Let him break the eggs, let shells get in the pan, eat them anyway." He huffed a laugh that felt like a sob in a suit. "You'll cook with us." "I'll wipe the counter," she said, and I'll be there the first time the fire alarm goes off." He tipped his head back until it thudded against the wall. "All my life I've bought the best version of things, the best schools, the best art, the best yard of newsprint. I didn't know there was a best version of sitting on a floor doing nothing." "It isn't nothing," she said. "It's refusing to abandon someone in their own quiet." He closed his eyes. "If he never speaks again." "Then the world will learn to listen better," she said. "Starting with you." He almost said thank you. The words felt too small for the economy of what was being traded here. He stood, straightened the cuff he didn't remember wrinkling, and walked away before he said the other thing he was not ready to say. "I need you." By late afternoon, the world had found them again. A drone buzzed near the terrace like a gnat that cost too much. A gossip site published Mara's high school photo beside a headline that bent the truth into revenue. Someone posted her apartment address in a comment that managed to be both cruel and bored. Bryony arrived at the service elevator with a wool coat over her arm. "Put this on," she said to Mara without preface. "The back alley gets colder than you think." "Do you need me to sign another paper?" Mara asked, half a joke. Bryony stared, then surprised herself by smiling. "I need you to keep not doing the things everyone else does to this boy." "Which are?" "Explaining him." Bryony's smile vanished. "If you become a story, we will lose him again." "I don't want to be a story," Mara said. "I want to mop a floor and be the reason he doesn't slip." Adrian appeared with a paper bag that smelled faintly of lemon and something else, panic maybe, dressed as dinner. "We're going to cook," he said simply. Then to Bryony, "Clear the kitchen, no chef, no cameras. If the building catches fire, let it." The kitchen was a cathedral of stainless steel, designed by a person who mistook quiet for clinical. Mara set a bowl on the counter and cracked an egg one-handed, letting a sliver of shell fall in and fishing it out with a finger the way mothers do when they've already forgiven the mess. She slid the bowl to Theo. "You try." He held the egg as if it might bruise. He tapped too softly. She nodded. He tapped harder. It cracked with a wet pop like a secret telling on itself. He looked at her, waiting to be corrected. "Perfect," she said, meaning the shell in the bowl, the yellow on his knuckles, the way his face loosened when nobody reached for a towel. Adrian stood 3 feet away, as if the floor between them were a country he might not deserve to enter. "What now?" he asked. "Whisk," Mara said. Theo lifted the whisk with both hands and stirred like weather. The yolk surrendered, gold unfolding into gold. When it slopped over the rim, Adrian's mouth opened in reflex, the reflex of a man who has paid to make mess disappear before it happens. He closed it again. He let the egg run. They ate burnt edges and undercooked centers at the kitchen island, on plates that had only ever known perfection. Theo licked his finger and made a face that, if you were the kind of person who names things, you would call delight. He did not speak, but he tapped the whisk twice against the bowl in a rhythm that was not random. Mara tapped back on the counter, same rhythm, an echo. He tapped again, different, testing. She returned it. His mouth flattened, then curved. A conversation in beats. That night, after Theo slept in a tangle of hoodie and string and the smell of lemon, Adrian stood alone at the terrace railing and looked down at a city that had made him a god, and then asked for offerings he didn't mind giving until now. He took out his phone, typed a draft message to the world, and deleted it. Inside, Bryony left a folder on the island. Mara Alves, it read, in a font that believes itself immortal. Her file was thin. The cleanest lives always look suspicious to the people who don't believe in them. Rent paid in cash order, 2 jobs, a night course once that she didn't finish because the world ate the hour she needed for it. A brother named Daniel who moved out of state. A mother's death certificate tucked between W-2s. He could have read it. He didn't. He turned off the chandelier. He left the kitchen light on like a lighthouse. In the morning the closet would hum. The boats would wait. The washer would spin. A boy would decide whether to risk a word in a world that punishes risk. A woman would decide whether to keep offering a harbor without charging a fee. A man would decide what kind of vow a father is allowed to make and still be worthy of the person it was made for. Terms of a different war had been set. No cameras, no prizes, no performances. Just the long, unglamorous work of letting a child come home to his own voice. And somewhere in that work, though none of them could see it yet, a sentence formed out of breath and courage and love, already on its way to being said. Morning arrived with the hesitant light of a city, unsure whether to believe in hope. In the Blackwell penthouse, silence wasn't just an absence, it was an inheritance. The house staff moved carefully, their shoes whispering over marble, as if afraid to wake the grief that slept in the walls. Adrian sat at the breakfast table, unread paper in hand. His mind, however, was in the east corridor, behind that small wooden door where, the night before, a woman who should never have been allowed in the ballroom had managed to stop the world for a few heartbeats. Theo hadn't spoken, not even close, but something had shifted. The boy had reached, had touched, had responded. For a man who built empires by reading invisible signals, that gesture had screamed louder than thunder. He glanced toward Bryony, his chief of staff, who hovered near the espresso machine, tablet ready. "You watched the footage?" "Yes," she said. "All night. Nothing happened." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Exactly." Bryony hesitated. "The board wants an explanation. The investors are nervous. They think the vow was unstable." "Tell them to invest in something else," he said. "This is the only stock that matters." Bryony studied him. "You're betting your reputation on a cleaning woman." "No," he replied quietly. "I'm betting on the only person in that room who didn't see my son as a headline." She said nothing more, but as she left, she sent a quiet message to the security office. "Monitor corridor east. Continuous feed. No audio." Downstairs, Mara scrubbed the same marble she'd cleaned 100 times. But today her hands shook. She hadn't slept either. She'd gone home, sat at her chipped kitchen table, and tried to convince herself that what she did last night hadn't been madness. "You can't just walk into a billionaire's grief," she whispered to herself, wringing the mop until her knuckles went white. "You'll get burned." But then she remembered the boy, how he'd untied the red string and looked at her as if the air had finally softened. That memory was enough to keep her standing. "Miss Alves." The voice startled her. A tall man in a tailored suit approached, not Blackwell, but one of his aides. "Mr. Blackwell requests your presence." Her stomach dropped. "Did I do something wrong?" He didn't answer. When they arrived at the penthouse kitchen, Adrian was waiting. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man who hadn't decided if he was allowed to be human again. "Sit," he said. She stayed standing. "If this is about last night, I'm not firing you," he interrupted. "I'm asking you to continue." Mara blinked. "Continue?" "Theo trusts you," he said simply. "That's more than anyone else has managed. I want you to keep whatever you're doing." She hesitated. "Mr. Blackwell, I don't know what I'm doing. I just talked to him. Or not even that, I sat with him." "Then keep sitting," he said. She frowned. "That's not therapy." "It's more than money has bought," he replied. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Two people from worlds that should never have collided, bound by the same silent boy who had forgotten what it meant to trust a sound. "All right," she said at last, "but no cameras. No observers. Just him and me." He nodded. "Agreed. And," she added, surprising herself, "no promises. You said whoever makes him speak will marry you. That's not how this works." Something flickered in his eyes. Shame, maybe, or exhaustion. That was grief talking. "Grief talks louder than love," she said softly. He almost smiled. "You speak like someone who's known both." "I've cleaned after both," she replied. And with that, she left to find Theo. The boy was in the library, a cathedral of quiet. He sat cross-legged by the window, sketching something in a small notebook, crooked lines, unfinished faces. When Mara entered, he didn't startle. She sat on the floor beside him, leaving space. "You draw?" He didn't answer, but his pencil didn't stop moving. "I used to draw," she said. "Mostly places I wanted to go but couldn't. Buses, bridges, windows, never people. People change too fast." Theo's pencil paused. He looked at her hand. at the faint chemical burns on her skin. "You can draw mine," she said gently, "if you want." He hesitated, then turned the page and began sketching her fingers. Small, rough strokes, more guess than precision. She stayed perfectly still. When he finished, he slid the paper toward her. It was clumsy, uneven, but somehow alive. "That's beautiful," she said. He shook his head. "No," she insisted. "It is. Because you made it." For a moment his eyes met hers, and in them something shifted again, a shimmer faint but real. He turned the notebook back toward himself and with slow concentration wrote one word under the drawing. Hands. Mara froze. He hadn't spoken, but he had written. And for a boy who hadn't communicated in over a year, it was as if a dam had cracked. She swallowed hard. "That's your first word." Theo traced the letters again, finger trembling slightly. "Hands," she whispered, "because hands listen when words can't." When Adrian saw the note later, his knees nearly gave out. He found Mara in the corridor. "He wrote something." "Yes," she said simply. "One word." He took the paper as if it were scripture. "Hands," he read, his voice caught. His mother used to say that a person's hands tell you what kind of heart they have. Mara looked away. "Then maybe he remembers her." Adrian's throat tightened. "He's remembering how to feel. Not just him," she said quietly. He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time since the accident, the mask of the untouchable billionaire cracked, not from weakness, but from recognition. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "We're only halfway across the bridge." That night the city lights glittered below like scattered gold dust. Theo slept for the first time without nightmares. Mara sat in the small staff kitchen, a cup of tea growing cold in her hand. Bryony appeared in the doorway. "He's not the kind of man who gives trust easily," she said. "I'm not the kind of woman who takes advantage of it," Mara replied. Bryony nodded slowly. "You might be the first." Before she left, she said one more thing. "If the boy speaks, your life won't be the same." Mara smiled faintly. "Neither will his." In the morning, Theo was gone. Panic hit like cold water. Adrian's call came through seconds later. "He's not in his room. Security's searching the property." Mara's chest tightened. "He doesn't wander without purpose. Check the east corridor." They found him in the same closet, sitting on the floor, the two cloth boats beside him. One of them was torn. The other floated perfectly in a bucket of water he'd filled himself. When he looked up, he wasn't frightened, just waiting. Mara knelt beside him. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" He pointed to the boat, then to his throat, then shook his head. "You don't have to," she whispered. "It's okay." He tapped the torn one, then the floating one, then pointed to both, as if explaining a choice too big for words. Mara understood. "Some things sink," she said. "Some things don't." He nodded, and in that moment, though no sound left his mouth, his silence spoke volumes: forgiveness, grief, courage, all the languages that live beneath speech. Outside, Adrian stood at the door, unseen, his hand over his mouth. He turned away before either of them noticed the tears that fell down his wristwatch. The morning headlines didn't whisper. They roared. Billionaire's marriage vow turns into scandal. Mystery maid heals the silent heir. Cinderella or manipulator, the woman behind Theo Blackwell's miracle. By noon, the Blackwell mansion was surrounded by cameras. Reporters camped by the gates. Drones buzzed the roof, and the online world had already crowned Mara Alves as either an angel or a fraud. Inside, Adrian paced like a man caged by his own wealth. Every ring of his phone carried another threat, from investors, from lawyers, from the board. "Damage control," Bryony said, standing near the window. "We can't stop the story, but we can redirect it. If we play it right, you're the grieving father who lost control of the narrative." Adrian turned on her, his voice low but sharp. "She didn't ask for any of this. She doesn't even have a social media account." "Exactly," Bryony replied. "That's why they'll invent one for her. Silence breeds myth. He rubbed his temples. Do whatever you must, but keep her and Theo out of it. Bryony sighed. That's impossible now. You made a vow on a stage. The world doesn't forget its favorite circus. Downstairs, Mara tried to scrub the same marble floors as always, but everywhere she looked, she saw herself reflected in strangers' phone screens. Her face, tired, confused, caught mid-blink, was everywhere. Two other maids whispered near the stairwell. She's the one, right? The one who's going to marry the boss? I heard she's after the money. Mara's stomach twisted. She wanted to tell them that all she wanted was peace, that she'd never meant to step into anyone's spotlight, but words like that sound like lies when you're standing in a billionaire's house. She left her cart and slipped away, heading toward the only place that still felt honest, the east corridor. Theo was waiting there, sitting on the floor, the red string coiled around his wrist like a secret he refused to lose. When he saw her, his shoulders loosened. You found your place again, she said softly. He nodded once. She sat beside him, pretending not to notice the security camera blinking red in the corner. They're saying a lot of things about us, she whispered. About me. But you know what? People always talk when they're scared of quiet. Theo looked at her, eyes steady. He untied the red string and handed it to her. You don't want it anymore? She asked. He shook his head. Okay, she said, wrapping it around her own wrist. Then I'll hold it for you until you need it back. It was the smallest gesture, a silent trust, but in a house where everything was measured in millions, it was worth more than gold. That evening, Bryony stormed into Adrian's office, tablet in hand. We have a problem. He didn't look up from the report he wasn't reading. We have 50. This one's different, she said, sliding the screen toward him. The board's moving to remove you as CEO. They're calling it an emotional breakdown. They think the vow, the woman, the media circus, it's proof you're unfit to lead. Adrian's jaw tightened. They can't. Not legally. They can if they vote you out. The meeting's tomorrow. He stood, eyes like flint. Then I'll face them. Not with her still here, Bryony warned. If they see that Maid in the building, they'll use her against you. They'll call her your weakness. He was silent for a moment. Then, she is my weakness? Bryony frowned. Then she'll be your downfall. He turned away. Or my redemption. Later that night, Adrian went looking for Mara. He found her on the terrace, standing alone, the city lights flickering below. You shouldn't be out here, he said. There are photographers everywhere. She didn't turn around. They can take what they want. I've got nothing left to hide. You shouldn't have to hide, he said. She laughed quietly. You think that's your choice to make? You have power, Mr. Blackwell. I have mop water and headlines. Then let me fix it. She faced him now. Fix what? The press, the lies, or the part where your promise made me a prize? He froze. I didn't mean... You meant it when you said it, she interrupted. And now you don't. That's the problem with people who live in palaces. Words are decorations, but out here, they're walls. He stepped closer. Then tell me how to tear them down. She looked at him for a long moment, searching for something real. Listen, not to the board, not to me, to your son. Adrian lowered his head. He still hasn't spoken. Not with his mouth, she said, but he's screaming with everything else. You just haven't learned his language yet. The next morning, Adrian walked into the boardroom like a man carrying both crown and cross. 20 suits turned toward him, eyes sharp, pens ready. Adrian, the chairman began, you've always been a visionary. But your recent actions... My actions saved my son, he cut in. If you call that weakness, then you've never lost something worth saving. A murmur rippled through the room. This company doesn't run on compassion, one director said. It runs on confidence, and right now the markets don't have any in you. Adrian smiled thinly. Then maybe they've forgotten who built those markets. He didn't win them over, but he didn't walk out defeated either. He left them with silence, the same silence his son carried, now turned into a weapon of its own. Meanwhile, downstairs, Theo waited in the closet again. But when Mara arrived, she saw that he wasn't alone. A reporter, a young man with a hidden camera, had slipped inside, pretending to deliver supplies. Theo sat frozen, wide-eyed. "Hey!" Mara shouted, storming in. "Get out!" The reporter flinched, caught. "I'm just... out!" she snapped, voice shaking with fury. He fled, nearly tripping over the mop bucket. Mara knelt beside Theo. "I'm so sorry. He shouldn't have..." Theo's hand moved. He touched her wrist, the one still wearing his red string, and whispered, barely audible, "Stay." Mara froze. The sound was small, fragile, but it was sound. Her breath caught. "Theo?" He blinked, as if unsure whether he'd really said it. She didn't push him. She just smiled through tears she didn't bother to hide. "I'm right here." Upstairs, Adrian heard the commotion and came running. When he reached the corridor, Mara was waiting for him, trembling but radiant. "He spoke," she said. Adrian went still. "He what?" "He said one word." He looked past her, at the open door, where Theo now sat on the floor, calm, quiet, clutching the string that had once been his only voice. Adrian stepped forward, kneeling beside him. "Theo." The boy looked up, eyes bright with fear and hope. He didn't speak again, but his lips moved around a soundless word that Adrian knew without hearing. "Dad." Tears broke loose from a place he didn't know still existed. Mara turned away, giving them space, but Adrian caught her wrist. "You did this," he said. She shook her head. "No, he did." And for the first time, he smiled. Not the billionaire's smile polished for interviews, but the kind that only comes after surviving something you thought would kill you. That night, as the city fell quiet, Adrian stood by Theo's bedside. The boy was asleep, the red string tied around his wrist again. Mara lingered by the door, unsure if she belonged in this world of silk and sorrow. "You should rest," Adrian said. "So should you," she replied. "I can't," he said, "because if I close my eyes, I'll think this is a dream." "It's not," she said softly. "It's just something real finally happening." He nodded. "Then stay, please." Mara hesitated, then stepped forward, sitting on the floor beside Theo's bed like she used to in the closet. "For tonight," she said. Adrian smiled faintly. "For tonight." The lights dimmed. The city kept buzzing. But in that room, for the first time in a long time, peace dared to exist. The next morning, the world already knew. Someone, maybe the reporter who'd been caught, maybe one of the security staff, had leaked the footage. It wasn't much. Just a few blurry seconds of a boy whispering one fragile word. "Stay." But that was all it took. Every network looped it endlessly. Talk shows dissected it. Psychologists debated whether it was spontaneous or manipulated. Conspiracy blogs claimed it was staged. And in the middle of all that noise, one truth was quietly buried: the humanity behind the miracle. Mara's phone buzzed non-stop. Unknown numbers, interview requests, offers from publishing houses. A stranger even offered to represent her brand. She turned it off and left it face down on her nightstand. The only sound she wanted to hear was the quiet hum of the morning, and, if she was lucky, the boy's voice again, not for the world, but for himself. Inside the Blackwell mansion, chaos reigned. Bryony walked into Adrian's office, her tone clipped and professional, the tone she used when panic needed disguising. "They're calling you a manipulator, a grieving father exploiting a child's trauma for attention. The board wants a statement." Adrian leaned on the desk, hands clasped. "And what do you think?" "I think you gave them blood," she said. "Now they want proof it's yours. I'm not apologizing for my son speaking. Then you'll lose the company." He looked up at her, eyes tired but defiant. "Then I'll lose it." Bryony exhaled slowly. "You can't protect them both, your empire, and the people you actually care about. You'll have to choose." Adrian didn't answer. He already knew she was right. Downstairs, Mara cleaned the corridor like nothing had changed. The mop glided across the marble, her reflection staring back at her, tired, uncertain, but still standing. Theo appeared silently like he always did. This time he held a crumpled newspaper in one hand. His own face was printed on the front page. Mara crouched beside him. "That's you," she said softly. He nodded, then tore the page in half. "Yeah," she whispered. "I'd do the same." He handed her one of the torn pieces, his half of the photo, and pointed toward the east corridor. "You want to go back?" He nodded again. She smiled. "Then let's go." In the closet, it felt like time forgot how to move. The faint scent of lemon cleaner lingered. The same hum from the vent sang above them. Theo sat cross-legged, holding the string. Mara sat across from him. "You don't have to talk," she said. "But if you want to draw, I brought something." From her bag, she pulled out a small box of crayons, the cheap kind that broke easily but smelled like childhood. Theo's eyes lit up. "Go ahead," she said. He grabbed a blue crayon and started drawing on the floor, waves shaky but deliberate. Then he drew a small boat, then another beside it. She smiled. "Two boats again." He nodded, pointing at the first one. "Me." Then the second. "You." Her chest tightened. "We keep each other from sinking, huh?" He looked up at her, mouth curving into a tiny, shy smile. His second miracle in 2 days. Upstairs, Adrian watched the security feed again, not because he didn't trust Mara, he did more than anyone now, but because that feed was the only place where truth existed, unfiltered. He saw the boy draw, he saw the woman smile, he saw something he couldn't name forming between them, something that terrified him more than silence ever had. Love. Not the romantic kind, not yet, but the purest form of it. Connection without transaction. The kind of love that didn't need to be earned or bought, and that, to a man who had lived his entire life buying affection, was the most foreign thing in the world. By late afternoon, the press had found Mara's apartment building. Reporters lined the sidewalk, shouting questions, flashing cameras. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Bryony called her. "Don't go home. They'll follow you." "Then where do I go?" Mara asked, panic creeping in. "Stay here. The staff quarters are being cleared." "I can't hide forever." "You're not hiding," Bryony said. "You're surviving." That night, Mara lay awake in a small guest room in the mansion. The moonlight carved silver lines across the floor. Somewhere down the hall, Theo's voice echoed faintly in a dream, one word repeated over and over. "Stay." She closed her eyes. "I'm trying," she whispered. The next morning, Adrian faced the board again, this time through a video conference. 20 cold faces stared back from glass rectangles. "You've become a liability," said one. "You've turned grief into spectacle," said another. Adrian didn't defend himself. Instead, he pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table to Bryony, who sat beside him. "What's this?" she whispered. "Proof," he said, "that I still remember how to be human." Inside were documents transferring half his shares into a trust, one he'd named after his son, the Theo Foundation, for children who lost their voices to trauma. "You're giving this away," Bryony hissed. "I'm giving it back," he said, "to the ones who never had what we wasted." He turned to the screen. "You want me gone? Fine. But when history remembers my name, it'll be next to something that matters." Silence filled the call. Not the corporate kind, the kind that follows when truth finally hits a table too hard to ignore. Meanwhile, in the garden, Theo ran for the first time in months, shoes thudding against the grass, laughter silent but visible in his face. Mara watched from the steps, heart swelling. He tripped, fell, and scraped his knee. She rushed forward, but before she could reach him, Adrian appeared from the path, crouching beside his son. "It's okay," Adrian said gently. "You're okay." Theo blinked up at him, tears glimmering, and then, hoarse, shaky, but unmistakable, he said it. "Dad." Adrian froze. For a moment he forgot how to breathe. Theo looked confused, afraid he'd done something wrong. Adrian pulled him close, his voice breaking. "No, son. You did everything right." From the steps, Mara covered her mouth, tears running freely. It was the second word, the one that healed what grief had broken. That night, Adrian knocked softly on Mara's door. She opened it, expecting instructions, maybe even accusations. Instead, he stood there holding a small box. "I thought you should have this," he said. Inside was the crumpled page from Theo's notebook, the one with the word hands. "You kept it?" she asked. "I keep everything that saves me," he said, "and lately that's been you." Her throat tightened. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why it means something." They stood there in silence, the kind that feels like a bridge being built plank by plank. Then faintly from the hall came a small voice. "Mara!" Theo stood there in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. She smiled through her tears. "Yeah, sweetheart?" He took a step forward and whispered, "Stay." She nodded. "Always." Adrian's eyes glistened. For the first time in years, the house wasn't echoing with absence. It was full of something else. Something small, fragile, but alive. But outside the gates, cameras still flashed. The world still wanted its story. And in the shadows, someone from Adrian's past, a man he'd once trusted, was about to sell the footage that would threaten to destroy it all again. The world never forgives miracles. It tries to own them. And this miracle was worth millions. The video dropped just before midnight. No watermark, no source. Just a file titled "The Maid in the Air." It opened with shaky footage from a security camera, Mara kneeling beside Theo, the boy whispering, "Stay." Then another clip stitched together from somewhere else. Adrian standing in the doorway, his hand briefly brushing Mara's arm. It looked intimate. Too intimate. Within hours, every platform was on fire. Affair scandal at the Blackwell mansion. Was the miracle a manipulation? From maid to mistress, the billionaire's hidden story. By morning, the same tabloids that had called Mara an angel were calling her a liar. Bryony stormed into Adrian's office before sunrise, tablet glowing like a weapon. "This is bad," she said. "They've made it look like you used her, that she staged the whole thing to get close to you." Adrian didn't look up. His knuckles were white on the edge of the desk. "Who leaked it?" "My guess. Someone from your security team, or the board. They want to bury you before you bury them." He stood abruptly. "Where is she?" "In the staff wing," Bryony said. "She's refusing interviews, refusing protection." "I'll handle it," he said, already halfway to the door. He found Mara in the corridor, sitting on the floor against the wall, her phone buzzing beside her like a dying insect. She looked pale, hollow-eyed, but not broken. Not yet. "They're saying that I used your son," she whispered. "That I know," he said softly. Her eyes snapped up, furious now. "You should have destroyed those cameras. I thought cutting the audio was enough." "Well, it wasn't," she said, voice trembling. "They've turned kindness into crime." He crouched beside her. "I can fix this." She laughed bitterly. "You can't fix them, Mr. Blackwell. You can't buy silence anymore." "I can protect you," he said. "You can't even protect yourself," she shot back. The words landed hard. They both knew she was right. A long silence stretched between them. Heavy, tired, honest. Finally she whispered, "Please, just keep Theo out of it." "I swear it." By noon, Mara's name was everywhere. Reporters shouted from the gates. Strangers dissected her life like a puzzle they were entitled to solve. One headline read, "The woman who broke a billionaire, and he let her." She tried to keep working, scrubbing, dusting, anything to stay invisible, but every corner of the mansion now felt poisoned. Even some of the staff began avoiding her, whispering when she passed. In the east corridor, the small closet where she and Theo had found peace was sealed off for maintenance. The door was locked. When she found out, something in her snapped. That evening, Adrian was on a call with his legal team when the door burst open. Mara stood there, wild-eyed. "You locked the closet," she demanded. He ended the call. "It's for your protection. They're crawling all over that footage, frame by frame." "That place was his safe space," she shouted. "You turned it into evidence." Adrian stood slowly. "You think I wanted this? I think you don't know what it means to lose everything and still be blamed for surviving." Her voice cracked. "I'm being called a fraud, a homewrecker, a liar," she continued. "And I can take that, but Theo can't. If he hears them say I lied about him—" "He won't," Adrian said firmly. "I won't allow it." "How?" she asked, tears burning in her eyes. By building another wall? You can't keep building prisons and calling them homes. He stepped closer, his voice breaking for the first time. I don't know how else to protect what I love. The words hung between them, fragile, irreversible. Mara stared at him, stunned. What did you just say? He took a shaky breath. I love my son, and maybe I love the woman who gave him back to me. She blinked hard. Don't say that. It's the truth. It's desperation, she said quietly. You're confusing gratitude with love. He shook his head. No, gratitude fades. This doesn't. But before he could say more, Bryony appeared in the doorway. Adrian, she said, voice low, the board just issued a statement. They're removing you from your position, effective immediately. He exhaled. Of course they are. Mara turned toward him. Then let me go. Let me take Theo somewhere safe. He looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. He's my son. And he's my hope, she said softly. You gave him a voice, but you're about to let the world drown it out again. Bryony watched silently. She's right, she murmured. Adrian's eyes hardened, but his voice was quiet. Then go. Take him, but promise me you'll bring him back when this storm passes. Mara nodded, tears falling freely now. If it passes. That night the mansion went dark. Bryony arranged a quiet exit, a car through the service gate, no headlights until they hit the main road. Theo sat in the back seat, half asleep, the red string wrapped around his wrist again. Mara turned once to look back. The house loomed like a memory too big to carry. In one of its windows she saw Adrian standing alone, a silhouette against the city glow. He didn't wave. Neither did she. Some goodbyes don't need hands. By morning, the news was relentless. Adrian Blackwell resigns. Board seizes control. Maid disappears with heir. They made it sound like kidnapping, like theft. Mara hid with Theo in a modest guest house outside the city, one owned by Bryony, who despite everything still believed in them. The boy slept soundly, clutching his string. For the first time in weeks, he looked peaceful. Mara sat by the window, reading the headlines on a borrowed phone, her heart heavy. She whispered to herself, let them write what they want. We know the truth. Behind her, Theo stirred and murmured in his sleep. Mum. The word was soft, broken, but unmistakable. Her hands trembled. She turned toward him, tears spilling over. No, sweetheart, I'm not her. He blinked, half awake. Then who are you? She smiled through the ache in her chest. Someone who loves you enough to stay. He smiled faintly and fell back asleep. Meanwhile, in the city, Adrian faced the press one last time. Cameras flashed, voices shouted questions, but he ignored them all. He read from a single sheet of paper. My name is Adrian Blackwell. I've built towers of glass and steel, but none of them stand as tall as the heart of a 7-year-old boy who learned to trust again. I stepped down from my company to protect what truly matters. His voice, his peace, and the woman who helped him find both. That's all you need to know. He didn't take questions. He just walked away. That evening he arrived quietly at the guest house. Bryony had told him where they were, though she warned him. She might not want to see you. He knocked anyway. Mara opened the door, surprise flooding her face. You shouldn't be here. I know, he said, but I had to see my son. He's sleeping. Then I'll wait. She hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered, noticing how small and ordinary the space was. Mismatched furniture, cheap curtains, the scent of detergent. Somehow, it felt more like home than all his mansions combined. They sat in silence for a while. Finally, he spoke. I lost everything. No, she said gently. You gave it away. He nodded. Maybe that's the same thing. Then, from the back room, a soft voice called out, Dad? Adrian froze. Tears welled instantly. He stood, walked to the doorway, and saw Theo, awake, smiling sleepily. The boy said it again, clearer this time. Dad! Adrian knelt, arms open. Theo ran into them. Mara watched from the doorway, her hand pressed to her heart. In that quiet little house, far from the marble, the press, the noise, something sacred happened. Not the miracle of speech, not the redemption of a billionaire, but the birth of peace. 3 weeks passed. No cameras, no headlines, no marble halls, just a small house at the edge of the city, where mornings smelled like bread and evenings sounded like laughter, still learning how to exist again. Theo talked now, not constantly, not loudly, but enough. Sometimes only to Mara, sometimes only to the stars. But every word was his own, earned like gold mined from silence. Mara worked at the local library, cleaning floors before opening hours and repairing old books after closing. She liked the quiet, the kind that didn't demand anything of her. Adrian visited every few days, always humble, always careful. He never came as a billionaire, only as a father, sometimes carrying groceries, sometimes toys, once even a second-hand guitar. Theo adored the guitar. He'd sit with it on his lap, plucking one note over and over, saying, "It sounds like us." "How?" Adrian asked. "Because it's still learning to talk," Theo said simply. Mara laughed softly at that, but later, when she was alone, she realized he was right. They were all still learning how to talk, just in different ways. One afternoon, while folding laundry, Mara heard a knock. She opened the door, expecting Adrian. Instead, Bryony stood there, hair windblown, expression unreadable. "I didn't know where else to go," Bryony said. "Come in," Mara replied, though confusion rippled in her chest. Bryony stepped inside, looking around the modest space. "So, this is where you disappeared to?" "It's not much," Mara said. "It's everything," Bryony replied. Then, softer, "You were right about him. He needed to lose everything to find himself." Mara frowned. "What happened?" "The board turned on itself," Bryony said with a tired smile. "The press got bored, the markets moved on, but Adrian—" She hesitated. "He hasn't touched a single cent from the foundation. He visits hospitals, orphanages, quietly. No cameras. I think he finally learned what you were teaching him." Mara looked away, throat tight. "I didn't teach him anything. I just listened." "Sometimes," Bryony said, "that's what teaching looks like." She set a small envelope on the table. "He asked me to give you this." Mara opened it slowly. Inside was a check, not extravagant, but enough to buy a home, a life. Written in the memo line, "For what can't be repaid." She looked up sharply. "I can't take this." Bryony smiled faintly. "Then don't. Turn it into something bigger." "What does that mean?" Bryony turned toward the door. "You'll know." And then she was gone. That night Mara found Adrian sitting on the porch when she got home. He looked tired, not from work but from carrying too much heart in too small a space. "You sent Bryony," she said. "I did," he admitted. "She's better at words than I am." "You didn't have to." "Yes," he said softly. "I did. He stared out at the twilight, where fireflies blinked like tiny lanterns. "I've spent my whole life building towers," he said. "I thought if I climbed high enough I'd see heaven, but all I saw was distance. Then you showed up, and you built a bridge instead." She looked at him, startled. "You think too highly of me." "I don't think highly enough," he replied. She smiled sadly. "You still speak like a man used to deals." He chuckled, shaking his head. "This time it's not a deal, it's gratitude." Then quietly, "And maybe love." She didn't look at him. "Love is dangerous." "So is silence," he said. For a long moment they sat without words, the same kind of silence that once saved a boy. Finally she said, "You can stay for dinner." He smiled. "That's a better yes than most I've heard in my life." Dinner was simple: eggs, toast, laughter. Theo told them about his day at school. "A boy asked why I didn't talk before," he said. "What did you tell him?" Adrian asked. "I said my words were sleeping," Theo replied. "And are they awake now?" Mara asked. He grinned. "Some of them." Adrian reached over and ruffled his hair. "That's enough for now." For the first time it felt like family, messy, ordinary, sacred. Later that week, Mara went to the community center near the old district, the same kind of place she used to clean for minimum wage. But now she wasn't holding a mop. She was holding a plan. The check Adrian had given her became the seed money for something she called the Red String Project, a small foundation to help children who'd lost their voices through trauma. Named after him, she said, looking at Theo, who stood proudly beside her. He lifted his wrist where a red thread still wrapped, faded now but unbroken. And after you, he said. When the local paper covered the story, they called it a quiet revolution. Mara didn't care for titles. She just wanted to help one child at a time. Adrian came to the opening ceremony. He didn't stand on stage, he didn't speak. He just sat in the back row, watching as Theo read a short message, his own words, written in shaky print on a piece of paper. He cleared his throat nervously. "This place is for kids like me," he said, "who have too many feelings and not enough words. We don't fix them here. We listen to them." The room went silent, then applause. And in that moment, Adrian realized something. The miracle wasn't his son speaking. The miracle was that the world finally listened. After the ceremony, Adrian found Mara outside under a string of lanterns. "You did it," he said. "You did it," she wanted to say back, but instead she smiled. "We did it." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you ever come back? To the house, I mean. It's empty without you." She looked up at the sky. "You don't need a housekeeper anymore." "I don't need a housekeeper," he said. "I need a reason to keep it from feeling cold." Her heart stumbled. "Adrian," he took a breath. "You once said love and gratitude aren't the same thing. I know that now. What I feel for you isn't gratitude." Mara looked down. "Then what is it?" He smiled softly. "Peace." Her eyes glistened. "That's the kind of love that lasts." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Some endings don't shout, they breathe. Weeks later, Theo came running through the doorway, waving a flyer. "Dad, they want me to speak at school about courage." Adrian chuckled. "And what will you tell them?" Theo thought for a moment. "That courage isn't loud, it's when you keep showing up, even when nobody believes in you." Mara, standing in the doorway, smiled through tears. "Then you'll be the bravest one there." That night, the three of them sat on the porch again, quiet, content, whole. Theo held the red string between his hands and tied it loosely around theirs, one loop on his father's wrist, one on Mara's, one on his own. "What's this for?" Adrian asked. "It means we don't forget," Theo said. Mara smiled. "What don't we forget?" He looked up at them, eyes glowing in the fading light. "That even broken things can hold together if you tie them right." The world beyond their little home still moved, with gossip, greed and noise. But here, under the soft hum of crickets and streetlights, everything that mattered had finally stopped running. A year passed. The city barely remembered the scandal anymore. New names filled headlines, new empires rose and fell. But somewhere beyond the noise, in a quiet street lined with jacarandas, peace had chosen a small home. Inside, life moved in soft rhythms. Theo's laughter filled the rooms now, not the ghost of silence that once haunted every space. He still wore the red string, though it was faded, frayed, held together by a dozen tiny knots made over time. "It keeps the good things close," he'd tell anyone who asked. Mara would smile, never correcting him. She knew he was right. One morning, as sunlight poured through the curtains, Adrian sat at the kitchen table reading. Not reports, not news. A book. Something about ordinary lives and extraordinary grace. He had stopped chasing towers. He worked now with the foundation, visiting schools and shelters, quietly funding programs that no one else cared about. For a man who once believed value came from numbers, it was strange how rich he felt without them. Mara entered, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You're home early." He smiled. "The board meeting was cancelled." "Why?" "Because I resigned again." She froze. "You what?" He shrugged. "They wanted me to consult for their next big acquisition. I told them I was busy helping my son learn guitar." She laughed. "That's not exactly a corporate priority." "It's the only one that matters." She looked at him, really looked, and saw it. The man who'd once hidden behind suits and headlines was gone. What remained was just Adrian, imperfect, kind, real. "Coffee?" she asked. He nodded. "Always." Later that afternoon they walked to the park together. Theo ran ahead, his laughter scattering birds into the air. Mara watched him, heart swelling. "He's changed so much." Adrian nodded. "He still gets nervous sometimes, but he talks, he sings, he lives." "And you?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Still learning." They reached a bench overlooking the pond, the same one they'd visited months ago when things were uncertain. Now it felt different, lighter. Mara sat. "Do you ever miss it? The power, the world you left behind?" Adrian thought for a long moment. "I used to miss the noise, the applause, but now—" He looked at her. "Now I just listen for laughter." She smiled softly. "Then you'll never run out of it here." Theo ran back, holding a handful of dandelions. "Make a wish," he said. Mara blew gently, watching the seeds scatter into sunlight. "What did you wish for?" Adrian asked. She smiled. "Nothing. For once I think I already have it." That evening, as twilight fell, they returned home to find a letter waiting on the doorstep. No return address, just a wax seal stamped with the Blackwell crest. Adrian frowned. "I haven't seen that in years." Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter from the board. They wanted him back, not as CEO, but as an honorary chair of the Theo Foundation. "They want to rebuild what we started," Adrian murmured, "with transparency, with purpose." Mara raised an eyebrow. "Do you trust them?" He folded the letter. "I don't need to. I trust what we've built." Theo tugged his sleeve. "Does that mean we have to move again?" Adrian smiled. "No, kiddo, home's not a place you leave, it's what you carry." Weeks later, they attended the Foundation's reopening event. Cameras were there again, but this time no scandal, no frenzy, just quiet pride. Theo stood on stage beside Mara and Adrian, reading a short speech he'd written himself. His voice was clear, steady. "When I was small," he began, "I didn't talk for a long time. People thought I was broken, but I wasn't. I was just waiting for the right people to listen." The audience grew still. "My dad taught me strength," Theo continued, "and Mara taught me kindness. Together they taught me that family isn't who you're born with. It's who stays when everything falls apart." A hush fell over the room. Then came the sound of applause, long, rising, real. Adrian wiped his eyes. Mara squeezed his hand. The red string around Theo's wrist caught the light, glowing like a small ember that refused to fade. Later, as the guests left and the lights dimmed, Adrian and Mara remained in the empty hall. "You know," he said softly, "when I made that stupid vow that whoever made my son speak would marry me, I thought it was just grief." "It was," she said gently. He smiled. "Maybe. But grief has a strange way of leading us home." She met his gaze. "Home?" He nodded. "To the people who understand silence." They stood there for a long time, neither moving nor speaking. Then he took her hand, not to pull, not to claim, just to hold. And for the first time she didn't pull away. Months passed, seasons changed, the red string frayed even more, but Theo refused to take it off. One evening, as the three of them sat watching the sunset, he asked, "Dad, what happens if the string breaks?" Adrian smiled. "Then we tie it again." "But what if it breaks too many times?" Mara brushed his hair gently. "Then we keep tying it. That's what love does. It doesn't stay perfect, it stays." Theo nodded, thoughtful. "Then I'll never take it off." They watched as the last light of day melted into dusk, a quiet, golden kind of ending, not dramatic, not loud, just real. Months later, an article appeared in a small human interest magazine. "From Silence to Song, the story of the boy who taught his father to listen." It mentioned no scandals, no money, no fame. Just a boy, a woman, and a man who learned that love isn't about who saves whom. It's about who stays when no one's watching. The final line read, "Sometimes miracles don't shout, sometimes they whisper, stay." That night, Mara placed the magazine on the shelf beside a framed drawing. the one Theo had made long ago of two boats floating together on a blue sea. One labeled me, the other you. She looked out the window, where Adrian and Theo were chasing fireflies in the yard. Their laughter rose into the air, unpolished, imperfect, beautiful. She whispered to herself, "He spoke," and we all learned to listen. The wind carried the sound away, soft and endless, like the echo of something that never truly ends. Because some stories don't finish, they just keep breathing, and the red string never breaks.